If you know me, then you know not only that I am a huge bookworm and read over 100 books a year, that I am voracious when it comes to especially fiction, and that I love talking about books on the internet, but also that I am a huge audiobook fiend. I am obsessed with audiobooks. I have been from a very young age. My qualifications in recommending audiobooks to you, I started listening to audiobooks on tape in the 90s when I was a small child, and have continued to ever since. I have taste tested audiobooks across the spectrum of genre over 3 decades. Even when I read physical books or ebooks, I'm often listening to the audiobooks simultaneously. There are audiobooks that have so become a part of me, become so intertwined with my DNA, that I literally can't listen to any other version of the audiobook for certain stories because I'm so attached to how specific voice actors delivered the lines and the little flourishes of music between chapters. And while I'm so much of a fan of audiobooks that I would literally listen to one as I read the book with my eyes, or even just sitting still staring at the wall, I too recognize that for a lot of people, the benefit, the biggest pro on the pros and cons list for an audiobook is that you can listen to audiobooks while you do other things. As well as, of course, the fact that they are accessible. They allow people who couldn't read otherwise the opportunity to read and appreciate stories, and that is a beautiful thing. But I also think that audiobooks are their own special kind of magic. There is something so deeply ingrained within the human psyche, an appreciation for oral storytelling. And without audiobooks, a lot of us are not experiencing that. We're not sitting around a campfire hearing a story on a regular basis. We're not necessarily having a book read aloud to us as we maybe had as children, experiencing that deep-rooted psychological urge that we have as humans to connect to each other, to hear and tell stories, and to pass on stories orally. That has been part of our tradition for as long as humans have existed, and I think in our modern life, we are very disconnected from oral storytelling, even those of us who consume hundreds of stories a year. Audiobooks bring us together. Audiobooks can bring a story to life in a brand new way, and I, obviously, from this tangent of love and adoration, am a huge fan. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to share with you the top 10 audiobooks I listened to this year. And it was very hard to narrow down because, as I have made clear many times on this channel, I hate choosing between my favorite things. It's painful, but I will put myself through this suffering for you to recommend for you 10 amazing audiobooks that you can check out, especially if you're new to audiobooks and wanting to give them a try. I want to get you started on the right foot, but also for those of you who are already on board and already love audiobooks, I just want to give you some recs. These are amazing audiobooks and you should listen to them. Now, if you are new to audiobooks, you might be wondering, where should I get these audiobooks? Where should I listen? And my recommendation would be Spotify. This video is kindly sponsored by Spotify, and I'm proud to be a Spotify partner. And being a Spotify premium member is even more fun as we near the end of the year because, of course, it's time for Spotify Wrapped. I listen to 89 genres. How is that even possible? I know that I have eclectic taste, but damn. Okay, so my top genres for Spotify Wrapped: bubblegum pop, classic rock, vocal jazz, bossa nova jazz, and singer-songwriter. Cool. Love that. Very interesting. Oh my God, it says my listening age is 77 because I'm into music from the early 60s. I'm an old soul. I'm playing Time of the Season by the Zombies. So my top listened to song for 2025 was Tears by Sabrina Carpenter, then Tough Luck by Leve, then Where's My Husband by Ray, then Clockwork and Lover Girl by Leve in 4 and 5. I'm honestly a bit surprised Where's My Husband isn't number 1 because I feel like I've listened to it on repeat since it came out. I'm happy to see Renee Rapp there. I was kind of surprised also that she wasn't in my top songs. Once upon a time, there was a book lover. It was you. Yep. I listened to 4 audiobooks on Spotify this year, and that makes sense because a lot of books that I listen to are very long. So it makes sense that I would get through around 1 a month on average. And I didn't finish the one that I was listening to in November. I'm close though. I'm close, but I didn't finish it. And my top genre is mystery and thriller. Swipe up for a bonus chapter.
Hi, audiobook listeners. I am stopping by to say a huge thank you for being a top listener of my books this year.
Oh, and then I got a little author's message from Ashley Flowers, who's the author of The Missing Half, which was a really great thriller. If you're looking for a thriller, if you're a fan of thrillers, the audiobook of that one was also really great. Oh, how fun. Apparently she's plotted out her next book. How exciting. My top artists being Leve, and then Sabrina Carpenter, and then Ray, and then the Beach Boys. Kind of surprising. I mean, I love the Beach Boys, but interesting. And then Olivia Dean. I'm surprised she made it on this list because I only really got into her music this fall, but I've listened hard. And I guess this is the proof. The proof is in the pudding. I'm surprised Hosier's not on there. He's usually my number 1 or number 2 on these lists, but I guess I haven't listened to his music quite as much this year. I've been into the girlies. Fun! Well, I would love to know what you got on your Spotify Wrapped. Let me know your top artists, your top albums and songs, and how many audiobooks you listen to and your top genre. So if you want to give audiobooks a try or specifically listen to the 10 top audiobooks I listened to this year, be sure to check out Spotify Premium. You can join with the link in my description box. And thank you again to Spotify for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, and in no particular order, okay, it's hard enough for me to narrow down all of the amazing audiobooks I listened to this year to a list of 10, so you cannot ask me to rank them from 1 to 10 and tell you my absolute favorite. That hurts too much. Okay, so this is just no particular order, the 10 best audiobooks I listened to this year. Let's get into it. My first recommendation is a more recent read, Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I read this obviously in physical copy, but I also listened to the audiobook and it was amazingly narrated by the well-known actor Michael C. Hall. When Dr. Lewis Creed takes a new job and moves his family to the idyllic and rural town of Ludlow, Maine, this new beginning seems too good to be true. Yet despite Ludlow's tranquility, there's an undercurrent of danger that exists here. Those trucks on the road outside the Creeds' beautiful old home travel by just a little too quickly for one thing, as evidenced by the makeshift pet cemetery out back in the nearby woods. Then there are the warnings to Lewis, both real and from the depths of his nightmares, that he should not venture beyond the borders of this little graveyard. A blood-chilling truth is hidden there, one more terrifying than death itself, and hideously more powerful. An ominous fate befalls anyone who dares tamper with the forbidden place, as Lewis is about to discover for himself. This book is so much about our protagonist and the interiority of his experience, his processing of the things that are happening to him, his working through his grief, and trying to make extremely difficult decisions under duress. And I really felt like Michael C. Hall gave us the performance of a lifetime in bringing his experiences, his thoughts and feelings, and his suffering and grief to life, to your ears. It made the experience even more painful than it would have been just reading with my eyes, and it would have been painful enough already. Let me just tell you that. This is a horror novel. This is a novel of humanity's deepest fears. This is a novel about grief and loss. And it's also the novel that Stephen King claimed was the scariest of all of his work and the one book he never wanted to publish. So if you're looking for some horror with a lot of heart that will impact you forever, I would highly recommend Pet Sematary. And I would also, of course, very highly recommend the audiobook as narrated by Michael C. Hall. And now for something completely different. My next pick is nonfiction, and that's How to Read Now by Elaine Castillo, narrated by the author. I read this as part of my Read It or Haul It challenge, so there's a reading vlog for this one if you want to check that out. I'll link it in the description box, just like there's a reading vlog for Pet Sematary. An exploration and polemic that redefines the power and potential of reading by a novelist whose prose is as good as it gets and who has a real voice, vernacular and fluid, with a take-no-prisoners edge. How to Read Now explores the politics and ethics of reading and insists that we are capable of something better, a more engaged relationship not just with our fiction and our art, but with our buried and entangled histories. This is a collection of essays, and Elaine is a previously published author, so she's coming at this not only as a reader herself and a fan of books, but also as a writer and someone on the other end hearing readers' feedback on her work. And the reason why this audiobook stood out so much to me is that it's narrated by the author. And that's something that I just love so much about audiobooks. If you ever get the chance to listen to audiobooks narrated by the author, even if the author is not a voice actor and maybe they're not performing the book quite as immaculately as an actor might, there's just something so special about getting to hear her words from her own mouth. Adds so much to the experience. And especially in the essays in this collection that got a little bit more emotional, to hear the emotion in her voice, to hear her passion when she got riled up about something, it just amplified my appreciation of these essays tenfold, and I would highly recommend them, not only because they're thought-provoking and interesting and so relevant to readers right now, but also the audiobook version. To hear these thoughts from Elaine herself is just such a special experience, and I think she did an amazing job. If you're a fan of nonfiction or just interested in becoming a better reader, I would highly recommend this collection, and especially the audiobook, narrated by Elaine Castillo. My next recommendation is usually classified as a romance, though I would say it better fits into the category of contemporary fiction or possibly literary fiction, and a little bit less so romance. There is a romantic subplot, but it's definitely a subplot and not the main plot. But either way, I highly recommend not only this book, but specifically this audiobook, and that is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, narrated by Julia Whalen. Now, if you're an audiobook fan, you probably have heard of Julia Whalen. She is a well-known, beloved audiobook narrator, and she's also very well known for narrating all of Emily Henry's books. Now, I'm not recommending every single one of Emily Henry's books here. You can check out my video about the Emily Henry effect if you want to hear my thoughts on her work in general and my frustrations with her and my wildly different reactions to her many different books. But Great Big Beautiful Life, specifically. I listened to the audiobook shortly before it was published in the spring, and I fell in love with it. This is my favorite Emily Henry book that I have ever read. It was an easy 5-star for me. It's just a beautiful story, and it touched me incredibly deeply in the way that it handles themes of loss and grief. I found it very touching. I could relate to so much of what the characters were going through and expressing. I felt very seen by it, and I definitely felt like the experience was only improved by Julia Whalen's narration. Julia Whalen is well known for a reason. She is amazing. She's a great narrator. She makes even books and characters I don't like very much better with her narration, but especially in a book like this where I care so much about the characters. I'm fully invested in the story. I am so drawn in by the themes and the plot and the messages being conveyed. To have it narrated by such a professional, such a skilled voice actor like Julia Whalen just brings the experience to a whole other level. I didn't buy a physical copy right away, so I don't have one to hold up because I was waiting for the paperbacks to come out so I could have a copy that matches the rest of my Emily Henry collection. Alice Scott is an eternal optimist, still dreaming of her big writing break. Hayden Anderson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning human thundercloud, and they're both on balmy Little Crescent Island for the same reason: to write the biography of a woman no one has seen in years, or at least to meet with the octogenarian who claims to be the Margaret Ives. Tragic heiress, former tabloid princess, and daughter of one of the most storied and scandalous families of the 20th century. When Margaret invites them both for a 1-month trial period, after which she'll choose the person who will tell her story, there are 3 things keeping Alice's head in the game. 1, Alice genuinely likes people, which means people usually like Alice, and she has a whole month to win the legendary woman over. 2, she's ready for this job and the chance to impress her perennially unimpressed family with a serious publication. 3, Hayden Anderson, who should have no reason to be concerned about losing this book, is glowering at her in a shaken-to-the-core way that suggests he sees her as competition. And it's becoming abundantly clear that their story, just like the tale Margaret's spinning, could be a mystery, tragedy, or love ballad, depending on who's telling it. I highly recommend Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, narrated by the one, the only, Julia Whalen. My next recommendation is getting back into the horror realm, although this one is very heavily historical fiction in its style, in its setting, of course, but definitely still horror, and that is The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, narrated by Shane Ghostkeeper, Marin Ireland, and Owen Teale. And as you can tell, there are 3 narrators, and that's part of why I love the narration here so much. We have 3 protagonists, 3 point-of-view characters, and each of them has their own narrator, and that's something so unique to the experience of listening to audiobooks, having the opportunity to have each character have their own very distinct voice. And that's not to say that books narrated by a single narrator aren't good or that the characters don't have distinct voices. voices, because a good narrator can make the characters feel distinct, even with their one and only voice. And there are amazing examples of that on this list, but in this case, it was just so well done. I loved all three of their voices so much. I felt like their voices fit the characters so well and really transported me to the different time periods and the different storytelling styles of the three characters, because each of them has a very distinct way of telling their story. And especially when it comes to Goodstab, whose sections are performed by Shane Ghostkeeper, his storytelling style is very much informed by the tradition of oral storytelling in Indigenous culture. And that's something that Stephen Graham Jones is well known for and is present in all of his books. And here I think it was even more prominent because he had three different perspectives, two of which are not Indigenous, and their ways of telling their story are very different stylistically from Goodstab's method of telling his story, and I just think it was so greatly enhanced by the audiobook. Honestly, in general, I'm not sure I would recommend this book without the audiobook as part of the puzzle. Of course, I also read the physical copy and I thought that was great, but I have seen so many people struggle with this book and Stephen Graham Jones books in general, and I think in part that is because of his style that lends itself so well to oral storytelling, to an audiobook, to the story being told to you verbally. And I don't think it always translates as well for people reading it on the page. I have certainly found that I love listening to audiobooks of Stephen Graham Jones books, although this is by far my favorite of his books that I've read. This chilling historical novel is set in the nascent days of the state of Montana, following a Blackfeet Indian named Goodstab as he haunts the fields of the Blackfeet Nation looking for justice. It begins when a diary written in 1912 by a Lutheran pastor is discovered within a wall in 2012. What is unveiled is a slow massacre, a nearly forgotten chain of events that goes back to 217 Blackfeet dead in the snow, told in the transcribed interviews with Goodstab, who shares the narrative of his peculiar and unnaturally long life over a series of confessional visits. This is an American Indian revenge story captured in the vivid voices of the time by one of the new masters of literary horror, Stephen Graham Jones. I have a reading vlog for this book coming out later this week, I think, is the schedule. So watch out for that if you want a long, in-depth review and experience reading and listening to this book with me. But I would highly recommend it. I think it's fantastic. I think thematically it is incredible, but also the writing is amazing. It really transports you to another life, to another time and place, and brings everything so close, makes everything so immediate and intimate and urgent in a way that only serves the story that's being told and the themes of colonization, forced assimilation, and generational trauma. This is so well done. The narrators did an incredible job, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend. Hopping genres again, this time into fantasy, specifically cozy fantasy, with Bookshops Bonedust by Travis Baldree, narrated by Travis Baldree. This is book 2 in the Legends and Lattes series. There are 3 books out now, but I think more are coming. I'm actually in the middle right now of reading the 3rd book, but while this is in the same world as Legends and Lattes, it is technically a prequel, so you could read this one first if you wanted. I'm a huge fan of this series. I'm sure you've heard of it if you spend time in bookish spaces online, especially if you're a fantasy reader. I am a little bit hard to please when it comes to cozy fiction and cozy fantasy, but I just love the characters that Travis Baldree writes. I feel for them. I want the best for them. I love their friendships and their connections to each other and their vulnerabilities and their moments of growth and change and self-reflection, and I just have a lovely time with every single one of his books in this world. And I love, especially once again, that he narrates his own stories. He knows exactly how he wants this story to land. He knows exactly what he intended by every sentence, and to hear it read in his own voice, especially because he is, as far as I know, a professional voice actor. He does narration for a living on top of being an author. I believe he was known as a narrator before his books became popular, if I'm not mistaken. He also is a great actor and does an amazing job at bringing these characters to life. Despite the fact that he is a single person doing the voices of many different characters, he does do different voices for different characters, and he really brings them to life. Again, I just think there's something so special about an author reading their own work because they know exactly what they meant. They know exactly what this character sounded like in their head when they were creating them, and so they are the best suited to recreating that for us, especially if they have the kinds of skills that Travis Baldree does when it comes to narration. He also just has a lovely voice to listen to. It's so funny, I'll never forget when we read Legends and Lattes as a book club pick, and I talked about how I really liked the narrator and his old man voice and how sort of cozy and nostalgic it was, and people were laughing because it was Travis Baldree and he's not an old man. But I can't let go of the fact that he has an old man sounding voice, and I mean that in a good way. Very much like your grandpa telling you a story. Even if Travis Baldree is not old enough to be anyone's grandpa, I really enjoy his voice. It's very warm and rich and cozy to listen to, and he definitely, again, because he has insider knowledge, being the author and all, is able to really bring out all the subtleties, all of the humor, all of the little moments, when to let a moment sit and when to keep the pace moving. It's just a pleasure to listen to his narration, and this series is absolutely lovely. Viv is a young, battle-hungry orc, but her career with the notorious mercenary company Rackham's Ravens isn't going as planned. Wounded during the hunt for a powerful necromancer, she's packed off against her will to recuperate in the sleepy beach town of Merk, so far from the action that she worries she'll never be able to return to it. What's a thwarted soldier of fortune to do? Spending her hours at a beleaguered bookshop in the company of its foul-mouthed proprietor is the last thing Viv would have predicted, but it may be both exactly what she needs and the seed of changes she couldn't possibly imagine. Still, adventure isn't all that far away. A suspicious traveler in gray, a gnome with a chip on her shoulder, a summer fling, and an improbable number of skeletons prove Merk to be more eventful than Viv could have ever expected. So I would highly recommend Bookshops Bonedust by Travis Baldree, narrated by Travis Baldree. My next recommendation is jumping genres once again. I'm trying to have a wide spread here for people who read all kinds of things, so that hopefully at least one of these will pique your interest. This one is an International Booker Prize winner and literary fiction, and one of our buddy read picks for 2025, and that is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo, narrated by Anna Maria Nabiria. And this is not only a gorgeous, moving, stunning piece of fiction, made me cry many times, has 12 different characters that we follow, and yet doesn't feel like it's overwhelming. I feel like you get to know every single character very well. You get to understand who they are, how they became who they are, and their relationships and what that means to them, and just has so much to say about identity and belonging and the experience of being a Black British woman. Very worthy prize winner, and we had an amazing, very long discussion about it, but it's also gorgeously narrated. Here is an example of a narrator who is portraying so many different characters, and Anna Maria does a beautiful job of making each character feel distinct. She also just has such a lovely voice to listen to. You know, if you're spending hours and hours and hours with a narrator, it's nice to listen to a narrator who has a beautiful voice. I'm especially partial to voices that are warm and rich and comforting, and Anna Maria has such a voice. It is just beautiful to listen to, and like I said, she really brings these many different characters who are very, very different from each other to life. They each feel distinct, they each feel real and vivid and fully embodied, while all being narrated by the exact same person, and that's a feat that I can only bow down to in full respect. So I would highly recommend this book, not only for the incredible story and the character work and the themes and just the journey and the gorgeous writing, but the narration by Anna Maria Nabiria just takes it to the next level. Girl, Woman, Other is a magnificent portrayal of the intersections of identity and a moving and hopeful story of a group of Black British women. Suffused with empathy and vibrant humor, Girl, Woman, Other is populated with unforgettable characters, sparklingly witty, centering voices we often see othered, and written in an innovative, fast-moving form. This is a polyphonic social novel by a masterful British writer who has finally been lauded at the level she has long deserved. Not a word of a lie. Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo, narrated by Anna Maria Nabiria. Now for the next recommendation, moving into a different genre once again with a modern classic, and that's Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I've talked about this book several times on my channel. I love it. It's a favorite. I recently reread this book with my book club, and I specifically wanted to highlight and celebrate the amazing narration by Holiday Granger. This book is amazing in general. It is considered a classic for a reason. It's gothic fiction. It was experimental in some ways for the time. It has this haunting, eerie quality to it. The writing is scrumptious and descriptive, lyrical and beautiful. There's a lot going on thematically, and the characters, as much as you kind of hate all of them, the whole time. They're so interesting. They're so complex and layered. They have so many secrets, and it's just fantastic. It's so entertaining. If you're looking for a classic to read that is just so fun, I would recommend Rebecca, and I would especially recommend the audiobook narrated by Holiday Granger. Holiday Granger has a gorgeous voice for narration. It is very, again, to my preference, this sort of warm, rich, cozy, someone telling you a story feeling. But she also really nails the sense of detachment that our unnamed narrator has. She brings us into the story and sort of hooks us, but also keeps us at arm's length, which is, I think, a difficult thing to do and really important for a story like this that has so many layers, so many mysteries, so many things to uncover. And it's such a perfect balance. Her voice and her style of narration very much evokes the feeling of sitting by a fire as someone tells you an unsettling ghost story. I just love it. I think it's an amazing audiobook version of this story that I love so much, and I would definitely highly recommend it. While working as a paid companion to a domineering elderly lady, the timid heroine of Rebecca meets Maxim de Winter, a handsome widower. His proposal of marriage takes her by surprise, and she is whisked off to Manderley, Maxim's Cornish estate. But the friendless young bride soon comes to realize that she barely knows her husband at all, and in every corner of every room she is haunted by the presence of his beautiful first wife, Rebecca. Love this book. Kind of want to reread it for a third time. And I also just love this narration so much. Highly recommend it. So that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, narrated by Holiday Granger. The next audiobook I want to recommend is yet another modern classic. This one is The Waves by Virginia Woolf. This was my first time reading any Virginia Woolf, and there's a reading vlog if you want to check it out. I'll link any reading vlogs for these books in the description box. But I just was so overwhelmed by the experience of this, and I think it was made infinitely better by listening to the audiobook. Now, this is one that I think you might struggle to listen to just the audiobook on its own because of the experimental style, but I do think that the rhythmic waves crashing against the shore, very lyrical writing style here lends itself so beautifully to being read as an audiobook, to being listened to as an audiobook. So this is definitely one that I would recommend as a companion read, a mixed media read, a simultaneous read, and it's just such a beautiful book. The version that I listened to and would recommend is narrated by Julia Franklin, and it's just this all-encompassing, immersive experience. It sort of transports you into this literary world that Virginia Woolf is building. You connect with these characters, you feel totally submerged in their experiences, and like the rest of the world sort of winks out or is muffled out of existence, and you're just in this pinprick of time on an island in the middle of an ocean, existing in the now, experiencing this story. It's beautiful. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I know I will reread this book probably several more times in my life, but I don't think I'll ever be able to capture the experience that was my first time, and I'm so glad that I started with the audiobook because I just feel, like I said, that this book uniquely lends itself to oral storytelling, to that almost theatrical performance quality that we get from Julia Franklin. The Waves is an astonishingly beautiful and poetic novel. It begins with 6 children playing in a garden by the sea and follows their lives as they grow up and experience friendship, love, and grief at the death of their beloved friend Percival. Regarded by many as her greatest work, The Waves is also seen as Virginia Woolf's response to the loss of her brother, who died when she was 26. This is another book that has a very prominent theme of grief and loss, and there are just so many gorgeous moments that I would rewind and just experience again and again. It's a beautiful audiobook, it's a beautiful book, and I would highly recommend The Waves by Virginia Woolf, narrated by Julia Franklin. Now, I know I said I didn't rank this list and it's in no particular order, and that is true, but also I did kind of subconsciously leave the best for last. And by the best, I of course mean very subjectively one of my favorite narrators of all time, who happens to have narrated 2 of my favorite books that I read this year. I want to talk about the incredible, the incomparable, the very hilarious Moira Quirk. Moira Quirk narrated Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong and Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is the third book in a trilogy. Moira Quirk narrates all 3 audiobooks, and they're all amazing. And I did technically re-listen to the audiobooks of book 1 and book 2 this summer, in part just for the comfort of Moira Quirk's narration. Let's start with Blood Over Brighthaven. This is fantasy, dark academia, and Moira Quirk delivers a much more subdued performance in this audiobook than she does in the Locked Tomb series, and it's still beautiful. She is such a talented narrator. She has a lovely voice to listen to, just aesthetically, but also she does such a great job of bringing characters to life. She's very theatrical. She is an actress, and as a theater-trained actor myself, I just appreciate that so deeply. She commits to the role. She commits to bringing these characters to life, even when she is doing a more subtle, understated performance, as she does here. This was an amazing experience. I loved reading this book. It's very emotional and intense at times, and Moira Quirk did such a great job of bringing that to life and really drawing you in and not letting you go until the book is finished. The first woman ever admitted to a prestigious order of mages unravels a secret conspiracy that could change the practice of magic forever in this standalone dark fantasy from the author of The Sword of Kaigan. So good. Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong, narrated by Moira Quirk. And I would definitely highly recommend it. And last but not least, we have Nona the Ninth, and also Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, narrated by my favorite, Moira Quirk. This whole series is great. It's speculative fiction. It is genre bending. It is a mix of sci-fi and fantasy with some horror elements. And the first book, Gideon the Ninth, has some locked room mystery elements. The characters here really stand out, and that is where Moira Quirk delivers in spades, because her character acting in this series is next level. She does different voices for each character. She has these quirks for different characters that make them instantly recognizable. You know who is speaking at any given moment. Some of her line deliveries in this series, in these audiobooks, have become memes within the Locked Tomb community online because they are so iconic. No, Magnus, for one. So many incredible moments, and so many moments that had me laughing out loud, which I don't do that often when I listen to audiobooks. You know, a chuckle here or there, sure, definitely, but fully laughing out loud, having to pause the audiobook because you're laughing so hard, doesn't happen often, and Moira Quirk has done it to me countless times. I love this series. I've recommended it many times. I think it's fantastic, but I also cannot recommend this series without recommending the audiobooks. I just think they are some of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to, and immediately became top favorites, slotted into that category that I was talking about for some of my childhood favorites, where they just alter your brain chemistry, and now you will never be the same. And also, you will never be able to listen to anyone else reading or narrating the story because you already have the voices established for you, and in this case, they are all Moira Quirk, and Moira Quirk is all of them. Is she Jawed? Might as well be. Well, yes, she is, because she also narrates Jawed. Anyway, I love Nona the Ninth as the third book in this series. I love the series in general, and I love Moira Quirk. The phantasmagorical fun of the Locked Tomb series continues with Nona the Ninth, a bittersweet story of an unexpected young woman growing up in someone else's body. In a deadly city torn between vicious resistance fighters and besieging necromantic forces, Nona lives a temporary life, finding solace where she can with her chosen family. So I highly recommend Nona the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, narrated by Moira Quirk. And that brings us to the end of this recommendations video. Here are all the books recommended, other than, of course, Great Big Beautiful Life, because they don't have a physical copy yet. I highly recommend you check out these books, and specifically their audiobooks, and I hope you love them as much as I do. Please let me know in the comments your favorite audiobooks, your favorite narrators. I would love to add more books specifically to my TBR as audiobook recommendations, audiobook listens. I feel like we don't get enough specifically audiobook recommendations talking about the quality of the narration, and as an audiobook connoisseur, as a lifelong audiobook lover, I think I need to be the change I want to see in the world. So leave your recommendations down below. Let me know your thoughts on any and all of these if you have read any of them. And don't forget to sign up for Spotify Premium with the link in my description box so you too can listen to every single one of these amazing audiobooks, because they're all available from Spotify Premium. I would love to know what you got on your Spotify Wrapped. Let me know your top artists, your top albums and songs, and how many audiobooks you listen to and your top genre if if you listen to audiobooks on Spotify. If you aren't already, you should. Thank you again to Spotify for sponsoring this video. And with that, we've come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave some sort of audio related, maybe to headphones emoji in the comments down below if you made it all the way to the end, so I know you're a real one. Look out for some more top 10 of the year wrap-up type videos coming up in the next few weeks. I love doing these at the end of the year. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.